The sound is deafening. On the flight deck of China's brand new supercarrier, the Fujian, a J-35 stealth fighter screams as it's shot off a new electromagnetic catapult. The propaganda cameras are rolling. State media is ecstatic. Beijing is throwing a massive party in the South China Sea, showing the world its new naval crown jewel. This is a clear, arrogant message of power, decades in the making. But 800 kilometers away, in the Philippines, another event is happening. There are no cameras. There is no noise, just the low hiss of ballast tanks emptying. Suddenly, the black, menacing hull of the USS Ohio, a monster of the deep, breaches the surface of Subic Bay. This wasn't an accident. This was theater. As China celebrated its new carrier, the U.S. Navy quietly, deliberately, revealed a single, converted nuclear submarine armed with 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Beijing just showed off its shiny new sword, and America responded by silently placing the barrel of a loaded shotgun against its temple. This is not a naval parade. This is the most dangerous geopolitical chess game on the planet, and a single move could mean checkmate. Welcome. If you value independent analysis that cuts through the noise and shows you the real battle playing out behind the propaganda, you're in the right place. Support our work by subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. Now let's get back to that submarine, because to understand why the appearance of the USS Ohio caused such a stir in Beijing, you first need to know what this beast is. The USS Ohio is a guided missile submarine, the first of its kind, and despite being the oldest in its class, it remains one of the most formidable weapons platforms ever deployed. Originally, in 1981, it was commissioned as a ballistic missile submarine. Its job during the Cold War was simple: hide in the ocean with nuclear weapons and serve as a deterrent. But between 2002 and 2006, the Ohio was transformed, and this conversion was extraordinary. The Navy removed the 24 Trident ballistic missile tubes and replaced them with launchers capable of holding up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Let's think about that number for a second. 154 Tomahawks. That's more firepower than the entire navies of most countries. Each missile has a range of about 1,000 miles and can strike targets, bunkers, command centers, naval installations, with pinpoint accuracy. But the Ohio is not just a missile launcher, it is also a covert operations platform. 2 of its missile tubes were converted into lockdown chambers that can hold up to 66 Special Forces operators, such as Navy SEALs, and their equipment. This makes it an asset capable of infiltrating sabotage teams deep into hostile waters. Most importantly, it is invisible. Its nuclear reactor allows it to remain submerged for months, limited only by the provisions for its crew of 155 sailors. It can stalk its targets without being detected. That is why its public appearance was such a devastating theatrical coup. When a submarine like the Ohio emerges in a foreign port, it is not because it needs to. It's because it wants to be seen. And the message it wanted to send in September was clear. U.S. strike capability is a direct response to China's military posture in the region. But what about the Chinese aircraft carrier? How does it compare? The Fujian is the pinnacle of China's ambition to project power. At 80,000 tons and over 300 meters long, it is the largest warship China has ever built, comparable in size to U.S. aircraft carriers. Unlike its previous designs, the Liaoning and Shandong, which use ski jump ramps, the Fujian uses electromagnetic catapults, or EMALS technology. This system allows the aircraft carrier to launch heavier aircraft with more fuel and more weapons. In short, it gives the Chinese Navy a much greater reach. And in September, the Fujian was testing exactly that. Chinese state media celebrated, showing videos of the J-35 stealth fighter being smoothly catapulted from the deck. At the same time, the KJ-600, China's answer to the US E-2 Hawkeye, also took off successfully. This combination of aircraft gives the Fujian long-range surveillance and strike capabilities. For Beijing, these tests prove that decades of investment to counter US naval power had paid off. China was closing the naval gap. The timing of these highly publicized drills is no coincidence. Russia, China's closest ally, remains bogged down in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the US has been showing off its own military advances. China, which increasingly depends on trade passing through the South China Sea and the vital Strait of Malacca, needed to remind the world of its military might. The display of the Fujian was intended to send a message to Washington and, above all, to Taiwan. The appearance of the USS Ohio in Philippine waters was therefore a stroke of genius on the part of the U.S. Navy. Subic Bay is about 800 kilometers from where the Fujian was operating. For a submarine like the Ohio, That's practically next door. In fact, the submarine could have been monitoring Chinese operations for weeks without anyone knowing, and then emerge at just the right moment to achieve maximum strategic impact. The message sent by the Ohio was devastating to Beijing's narrative. First, it demonstrated that U.S. submarines can operate undetected in waters that China considers its sphere of influence. Despite China's massive investments in anti-submarine warfare capabilities, sonar, patrol aircraft, even AI, they failed to detect the Ohio. Second, the timing emphasized an uncomfortable truth. While aircraft carriers are impressive symbols of power, they are also massive and vulnerable targets. The 154 Tomahawk missiles aboard the Ohio could, theoretically, be on their way to the Fujian and its entire escort fleet before Chinese forces even knew the submarine was there. The stealth of a submarine gives it a first strike capability that surface ships simply cannot match. Third, the presence of the Ohio in Subic Bay reinforced the strength of U.S. alliances in the region. The Philippines, despite pressure from China, continues to allow U.S. military access to its bases, creating a network of positions that effectively surround the waters claimed by China. This is not the first time the U.S. has deployed submarines in the Indo-Pacific as a show of force, but this time was different. The USS Minnesota, a Virginia-class submarine, has also patrolled the area, but the Minnesota is an attack submarine, a sniper designed to hunt other ships. The Ohio is different. It is the display of a former nuclear missile carrier converted into a naval strike force. And the fact that it was the Ohio, an older design, that surfaced sent an even more chilling message. If they couldn't detect this one, how on earth are they going to detect newer, stealthier models like the Virginia? The United States still has an overwhelming advantage in submarine operations. It operates a fleet of 53 attack submarines and 14 ballistic missile submarines, in addition to the 4 converted ones like the Ohio. These vessels can operate anywhere in the world with almost total impunity. This creates a strategic problem for China that no number of aircraft carriers can solve. To project power, China needs its surface fleet to operate far from its shores, but each of those surface ships is vulnerable. The Fujian aircraft carrier group must maintain constant anti-submarine operations just to create a protective bubble, which consumes resources and ruins the image of naval superiority. And then there are those Tomahawks. The Ohio's capacity to carry 154 of them means it can threaten targets deep within Chinese territory. Coastal airfields, command centers, missile batteries, everything becomes vulnerable. China's area denial strategy, built to keep U.S. aircraft carriers at bay, becomes much less effective when submarines can approach Chinese shores undetected. Besides, let's be honest, China is still incredibly behind technologically. The Fujian is its first aircraft carrier with EMALS catapults, yes, but we've seen multiple reports that it's nowhere near the U.S. Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier in terms of power projection and technical robustness. Its J-35 stealth fighter, while advanced, lacks the proven combat track record of the F-35C. The KJ-600 has barely been seen in sporadic tests. In contrast, U.S. aircraft carrier operations represent decades of institutional knowledge and real combat experience. At its core, the USS Ohio represents a technology that China cannot yet match. Beijing has publicized its nuclear submarines, such as the Jin 094 model, but since they do not appear to have been tested far from shore, how stealthy they really are remains a mystery. Most of China's attack submarines are still diesel-electric, much noisier and with greater refueling needs than nuclear-powered submarines. Beyond the direct dynamics between the US and China, the appearance of the USS Ohio has significant implications for Taiwan. The Fujian's operations are likely designed, in part, to prepare for a possible blockade or invasion of Taiwan. However, any Chinese operation against Taiwan would require maintaining control of the seas around the island and protecting vulnerable transport ships. This is where U.S. submarines become absolutely critical. A handful of Ohio and Virginia-class submarines could devastate a Chinese invasion fleet before it even reaches Taiwan. Furthermore, Taiwan, learning from Ukraine, is implementing a Porcupine strategy, filling its coastline with defenses that would make any invasion incredibly costly. And remember, China continues to depend on Taiwan's microchip industry. In 2022, China accounted for more than 40% of Taiwan's exports. Although that trend has reversed toward the U.S. in 2025, China continues to benefit from the island's proximity. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues to invest in the domains that really matter: undersea technology, long-range precision strike capabilities, and space-based surveillance networks. China is investing heavily in visible displays of power. Aircraft carriers, advanced fighter jets. They are impressive, photogenic, and excellent for propaganda. But the United States continues to invest in capabilities that do not always make headlines, but fundamentally shape the strategic environment. Fundamentally, the geography of the Indo-Pacific favors U.S. submarine operations. China's naval forces must pass through several strategic choke points to reach the open ocean, such as the Miyako Strait, the Bashi Channel, and the Strait of Malacca. Each of these can be monitored and controlled by Allied submarines. The September 2025 confrontation between the USS Ohio and the Fujian perfectly encapsulates the current state of naval competition. China is building an impressive surface fleet, but the U.S. maintains absolute dominance in the domain that matters most: submarine warfare. While China's aircraft carriers generate dramatic photos, it is the submarines that no one sees that truly shape the strategic balance. The appearance of the Ohio demonstrated that even older models are virtually undetectable, and that the United States will not take aggressive posturing in the South China Sea lightly. So, what have we truly learned today? We've learned that in the 21st century, there are two distinct types of power. There is the power you show, the spectacular, deafening, multi-billion-dollar spectacle of a new supercarrier, the Fujian, launching its jets for the state propaganda cameras. It is a magnificent symbol of what a nation aspires to be. And then, there is the power you hold, the silent, unseen, terrifying power of 155 sailors sealed inside a 560-foot black steel tube, lurking for months at a time in the crushing darkness, capable of unleashing 154 Tomahawk missiles before the enemy even knows they are there. China showed the world a new symbol. The USS Ohio surfacing was America, reminding them what a true hunter looks like. That is the awesome, terrifying difference between looking powerful and being powerful. This is the real geopolitical chess game, played not just with steel, but with psychology. And in this deadly game, what do you truly fear more? The loud, visible threat you can see coming, or the silent, invisible one that's already there? Is China's massive investment in these visible, vulnerable carriers a strategic masterpiece, or is it just the world's most expensive bluff? We genuinely want to know your thoughts. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you on the next one.